We really have two major objectives. One is to call out by example, and we've got two great panelists here, Nicky Liu, CEO of e-tron Technology, has a rich history of education both from Taiwan and US, worked in US, and then returned and started multiple companies and leading in Taiwan. And Neela Patel, who's the director of scientific assessment and technology licensing for ABAV. She's also a member of the National Academy's Board on Global Science and Technology. And as we come forward in this session, what we're going to be looking at is describing some of the activities that countries are engaged in creating value. And in the process also identify opportunities for learning and win-win collaboration potential with the US and the rest of the world. So let's begin. Nicky, you've served as a researcher, inventor, and entrepreneur. We had a great conversation at dinner last evening.
Yes.
And I think it's worthwhile for you to tell the story of how you made your choice to leave the US and go back to Taiwan and start the company, because I think it provides context of what the developing countries are doing to bring back the best talent.
Okay. First, I have to thank Nick here. He's my mentor back to IBM time of my career. And one day that Morris Chen of TSMC phoned me and said, Taiwan want to build the semiconductor industry much bigger and more advanced. And I'm the guy they are shooting for. And then I study. I love IBM, I can use their words. But I think maybe going back to Taiwan, I have chance founded my company, that's e-tron Technology, I'm still working today. And also recreate some technology there. And they plan to do foundries technology service, which could be beneficial to IBM, to many companies here. So that triggered me back there to create something from almost zero to something. That time, Taiwan semiconductor output is 0.8% of the worldwide. And after we developed the 8-inch wafers and new technology, I finally make a royalty payment from TSMC. And then today, 20 to 25% of silicon contents. So I think Stanford gave me education, and I was lucky in my graduate year that the first class on entrepreneurship was, given. And I still remember Gordon Moore, Andy Grove, many entrepreneurs come to, Stanford with that kind of roots. When I worked for IBM, I tried many innovative things with make IBM probably with my patents. People told me several $1 billion return on the DRAM cell and technology. But I think things change globally. I sense it. And I think I went back to Taiwan. I am not detached with this US innovation circle. I can do more. That actually happened today. So that's my brief introduction.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the ecosystem that was created to facilitate your ability to start a company in Taiwan at that time.
That's about 20 years ago. Right now, Taiwan ecosystem is lagging behind maybe China. My life is bumping around, like a fabric woven in vertical direction from internet, clouds, mobile, then device and semiconductor, then application and software. And then I want to add one thing now, people factor is important, okay? So if I elaborate what happened in Taiwan 20 years ago, the good parts is they set up Science Park. They put the VC, they put the, funding the company logistic, all in one single window. So as my first venture, I didn't spend too much time on the venture stuff. I spent most of my energy on building the value of products and technology. And I think they still continue on that, but I think I also urge Taiwan, that's not enough. Because later I show you one legendary story happened in the last 3 years in China.
Why don't you go ahead and share that?
Oh, okay. Okay, if you allow me. Okay, Neela.
Oh, yeah.
I bring some material, although it's Chinese, but I just want to impress you on this. Okay? You look at this. This is called a legendary Xiaomi. Xiaomi make phone set, but they claim they are a networking company. But important thing is within 3 years, their market value, depending on the infrastructure system, whatever you call in China, now worth $10 billion. But this guy developed a new model. He didn't count on relationship with the telecom service company. He tried to set up something on the network and collect about 800 so-called Mi fan. Mi means rice in Chinese, okay? So he used Mi. And he also doesn't put a lot of advertisement, so his company is very profitable. And how he do the fence? All through the internet. So here, you know, $10 billion market value within 3 years. Something, it's not the original innovation like Steve Jobs, but it's secondary innovation which still can collect such kind of value in short time. That's worth us to pay attention to. So this guy looked like this, and you cannot differentiate the pants and shirts look like Chinese Steve Jobs. So today, if I travel from China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, and here, I think more emphasis today maybe on China. Because rest of the country, we know their patterns. Yes, they are still creative. But on the other hand, this handset changed our life in this country. But not so much, because we already use PC. We already use high tech. So we know changes, but it's not like a life. These kind of guy get offense. To those Chinese young generation, these things look like a miracle. Something dropped from the God, and they can create and quick access to technology, worldwide changes, and the capital. The most important thing, I think creating innovation in this country, somehow we have to create desire. Okay? I was in Beijing a month ago. I see that how much desire those young generation is. Okay, they went to some coffee shop, and people sitting there outside the coffee shop, all the venture capitalists. Okay, later maybe I explain more what kind of. So the guy maybe get a secondary innovation idea, but he can get immediately the money to start up his company. So in Beijing last year, 4,800 companies started up. Okay, you can say, oh, very small company. It may become Facebook, it may not, but that momentum was there. And 20 years ago, momentum was in Taiwan, and now I have to admit more desire to be successful in the younger generation is in China. So when we talk about many methods and many things, how do we stimulate our young people to be innovative and knowing the competition from the Far East may be most important. Thanks.
Maybe shifting a bit. Neela, you are currently actively engaged in examining technologies around the world, have used it in your previous roles for bringing technology forward. Maybe you can comment around what you're seeing in the developing world and why the advantage for you to reach out beyond the borders of the U.S.
Absolutely. So I think I want to reframe the question a little bit specifically for my industry, even though I know that the emphasis here is on manufacturing. When I think about the biotech, pharmaceutical, healthcare industry broadly, for us, the issue is less about a loss of manufacturing jobs. It is currently a shrinking industry, I will say, not healthcare, but pharma and biotech overall is a shrinking industry. But the real issue is around the innovation of new products. And where are those ideas coming from, and what it takes for them to grow up. And as I've looked around the world, I've looked around the world for different things. In my previous job for capabilities when we were a virtual company, could I do my chemistry elsewhere? Could I do my biology experiments elsewhere? Could I do my analytical work elsewhere? Because we simply didn't have the money to build that capacity, and it would have made no sense given the peaks and troughs in our demand. And when we looked worldwide, China was a very good place for us to be for chemistry, but not for the inventive side of the chemistry. For the, we design the compound, you make it and ship it back to us. We wanted to then add on the biology side, okay, can you test it? But the capacity just wasn't there at that time. I mean, I'll give you an example. We did site visits to various CROs to see what the capacity was. And in one case, we said, okay, you said you could do this kind of experiment. Let's take a lab tour. And we said, well, where is the plate reader? That's a really basic piece of equipment. They said, well, as soon as you send us the first check, we'll go buy the piece of equipment. And I kind of said, well, that's really not going to help me. I mean, I need somebody who already has that expertise. So we ended up not being able to do all of our work ex-US. It was a split. And then later in my career, as I started to look around for where we were going to source innovation, we haven't really seen, just as you were commenting on, Nicky, we've seen secondary innovation, like in the biological and pharma sector out of China. There'll be a Me Too or a Me 3, and it will be for the Chinese market. And it will maybe ignore some intellectual property law or be a little bit of a skirt there, right? But they're not products that we would want to take in because it's not the cutting edge. The places where we're seeing the new ideas grow up comes back to your ecosystem question, exactly back to your ecosystem question. Our most prominent centers are actually still in the United States, the Boston-Cambridge area, the San Francisco Bay Area, the San Diego area. We see some hubs in Europe, primarily Israel, some in Germany and UK around Oxford, Cambridge. Worldwide, we see some interesting things happening in Poland, in Finland, in Sweden. And I would say the common elements in all of those places are, first of all, the education system. So you have a highly educated, and it's not necessarily workforce in the sense that we're talking about, oh, we need people to do this or that. It's people who have the PhDs who are thinking either in a university setting or in a startup setting, what are the best things to be doing? And there is a high enough concentration of both entrepreneurial talent, capital, local, state and federal incentives to help that grow up, venture. But for us, the collapse, honestly, of venture money flowing into early stage companies has created a hole. There's actually a hole in our innovation pipeline, and it's moving, you see it moving through. And it's not just company by company, it's industry wide. And we sort of have a saying that a good idea can be born anywhere, but it can't grow up anywhere in our industry. And we can come later to some examples, but those are my kind of top first thoughts.
Very common themes that we're hearing relative to the criticality of the ecosystem, the talent being present, and the supporting funds and infrastructure. What are you seeing, notably, relative to new business models and business model development that are taking place in other countries that you think are promising for growth in your industries and outside of that?
Okay, let me start first. I think you are familiar with Google, and I think this country promotes clouds All those kinds of things have been mirror imaged to China, but they transplant deeply and rooted. Let me give you an example. In this Chinese New Year, their Google system, like Tencent, and announced one thing, is using cloud to let the taxi driver directly contact to the customers. You know, crowded in Shanghai, it's very difficult to get taxi during a certain period of time. But the guy can use cloud. And Tencent receive that message delivered to the taxi driver. So taxi driver contact that guy, make the engagement, but that's not magic business model. The real business model, if that guy go there, I mean the driver go there, that customer disappear because he got a newer, earlier taxi to leave, 10 cents. The cloud guy paid the taxi driver 10 RMB, which is a pretty pleasant taxi, tips. And also, if you go through the traffic, get into the place to pick up customer, the cloud calculated and 10 cents calculated, and they add something to the taxi driver. Hey, where did they get the money from? But 10 cents during the Chinese New Year, use this taxi driver stuff, increasing about few million population of drivers of using this service. By the way, the union is not happy. The taxi company are not happy. The government worry about it, but the movement had already launched. Okay? I would say that's a business model, using cloud to let people direct contact in the crowded population countries. And one more thing, make Alibaba, their competitor, extremely paranoid, is that during the Chinese New Year, Chinese give the, we call hongbao, it's read the envelope inside some money to give the kids or your beloved one, like the Valentine. And the 10 cents lunch say, okay, now you guys can put your envelope on clouds in my network and designate to the person you want to give the cloud. You want to give the money. And the one receive the money has to get on the cloud. So within a week, they get 8 million people registered. And Alibaba has the financial networking, but didn't win so many people within that short time. So that's happening in the network things. And many invention happen in hardware, like semiconductor manufacturing and design. And now we see their design house, fab, tied up with like a system house, like a Huawei, a major competitor with Cisco. Build their own ICs, and that design house last year becomes $2 billion shipment. And what kind of things they ship, nobody knows. It's almost like, Nicky went out. It's like IBM, okay? That time we did semiconductor inside, and the value we can create with software and the spec is probably many times, okay? So I just elaborate 1 or 2 points, and both software, hardware, clouds. And the really things I think we need to put into our consideration is their population is large. Certain high percentage of people want to get into the technology and the engineering, because engineers are well respected in Far East society. Okay? In the past, in Taiwan, same thing. Now they pay more attention to, lawyers. Okay? But in China, young people with talent still want to put into the engineering as their major. And with this cloud, with this network, with this mobile technology we invent here, it's a great gift for them to populate it, okay, for consumer usage. And gradually, they build not only consumer usage, they build communication and even car in the future. Okay? That's the current situation happening there for so-called technology advancement. Okay, not necessarily disruptive technology we see in our country like Steve Jobs or like Google, but evolutionary innovations with constant, pace or faster pace is that what we have to pay attention to.
Great.
And as far as business models, I think that there's two things that I see going on. One actually is happening here, but it's happening worldwide, which is, as we commented on before, the ability to tap into, to be an entrepreneur who doesn't need to build everything in-house, which 10 or 15 years ago, if you wanted to have a startup company, you would have to have all the equipment, all the skills, everything in-house. Now you can be a virtual company, and I think that that's more and more of a business model, not only here but worldwide. But I wanted to comment more broadly on, and I know how much anathema this is in the current fiscal environment, but there are things from a government perspective that can make a big difference. And when I look at an example of the number of new startups in the biotech area in Israel that we see that are doing really cutting edge work of things that we would want to license, we would want to add to our pipeline, it's a very large percentage relative to their population. And when you look at how long it's been like that, it's not been like that for very long. Most of the government incentives and the infrastructure, aside from the universities, which have been excellent from the start, foundation of the country, most of the rest of the cash grants for R&D up to 50%, up to 70% in some regions, and then a model where if that grant leads to a commercialized product, there's a royalty stream that pays back that grant, so it's ultimately can be an evergreen type fund, grants for pre-competitive alliances between academia and industry. All of that started in the 90s with the collapse of the Soviet Union, which led to a huge influx of scientists to Israel. So it's not that long ago. And the trajectory for the difference that those government investments in that R&D piece made is tremendous for the number of companies that you see. I mean, a couple years ago, that $400 million that they had to give in those grants went to 500 startups in the life science sector alone. That's not insignificant. So I think that there is a piece that I know how much we don't like to talk about that in this country because given sort of the moves towards austerity, but I think that it's a bit short-sighted, right? Because you have to prime the pump, and putting the money there yields huge rewards in terms of employment and future jobs and products, and then ultimately revenue. But it's not a 3-month return, it's not a 1-year return, but it's there.
Right. And in this case, it was a national strategic decision
That's
to
right.
grow this industry, invest in the industry, and create those ecosystems.
That's exactly right. And it cuts across when we say biotech in Israel includes the agricultural sector as well as the pharma industry.
How about yourself in terms of what governments and institutes are doing now that you see are quite innovative in the creation of new enterprises, Nicky?
Okay. I think in Taiwan, as I said, 20 years ago, the government used smart ways to funding the R&D in a common research lab called ITRI. And then ITRI has spin-off, a certain relation built up with private industry. That's where the TSMC get the spin-off from the ITRI. That kind of model is kind of old, so, and also, Taiwan get a lot of different voices from the conventional industry, said, okay, you get too much privilege to high tech, and the society shouldn't do that. So a lot of national policy to steering the high tech and give incentive to high tech is reduced, which I'm not happy. And I don't think See, the semiconductor is about 1/10 of the GDP of Taiwan and make 30% of the gross profit. That means one Taiwanese make $1 and 30 cents is coming from my industry. But people, general people, are not proactively educated to embrace this kind of technology. So we are in the move to re-educate the country fellows, okay? But Korean is I switched the gear to Korean. Korean has a few big conglomerate, everybody knows, Samsung, LG. I think they have certain ways tuning their pace with the government and to become more conglomerates. Their outgoing force is worried Taiwan or Japan cannot catch up. But I ask most of the people, worker in Korea, they may not be happy. That's the only thing we get more than they are. But on the other hand, once we lose the economic advantage in Taiwan or Japan, that will make things very difficult. So high tech, how important high tech, how to deliver the value add innovation and high tech to the general population is extremely important. I think it's important for this country too, okay? But let me elaborate on China's side. China looked like after 10 years learning technology and the general population work and environment, I think they are pretty clever to design their support. First, they pick out network security and semiconductor are two heavyweights, heavy investment, and critical core technology the government wants to support. But the way they support is through the banks, through the VCs, still abiding by maybe WTO rules. But the leader, publicly known, is the vice premier of the country. So network, when I mention Xiaomi, when I mention Alibaba, those are strategically important. And
At a national level.
yes,
Right.
but in the national level, that kind of heavy investment, they have ways to sourcing the investment. Like some rumors said, like semiconductor for the next 5 years, every year over $10 billion. We are get scared, okay? Taiwan still dig out the information, and it look like, they will duplicate Taiwan's success, foundry, design, and system house link, which is not, Taiwan is not strong. And Taiwan hope to do technology service with American company so we can build this infrastructure. But in China, look like they are building infrastructure in a closed door way. However, the reason I say they are smart, they put the apps, consumer innovation, games, those things to free private money sourcing, okay? They encourage that way. Still have government behind, but they attract more and more VC overseas and let the IPO be more attractive. So I think government need to play the role to make strategy or hierarchy for the industry investment, okay? And the infrastructure investment, as I said, they have their plan. So all the people commit to like semiconductor or network security feel they have tenure for their career. So a lot of good people join that. But on the other hand, for light investment things, leads $10 million, $20 million, or like this Xiaomi, they quickly access to the private capital, which sometimes are planned by the government. So this, if I can allow me to?
Yes,
okay.
go ahead.
My second things, this is Beijing's, they call Silicon Valley Zhongguancun. Zhongguancun means China village, okay? So they put, just like the previous speaker said, they put a small cluster within 2 kilometer square area. And all the VC, or the investment banker, or the young people, or the corporate go there. So what do they have? 2008, from 2008 to 2012, okay, they have more IPO than our Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is 43 company IPO. But this China village in Beijing, 120 company IPO. Some in NASDAQ, some in China. How much the turnover in Zhongguancun? They claimed it's $400 billion US dollars. Well, that number shocked me because that's big money. Okay? And you know, I think this is Taiwanese reporter. Taiwanese has a freedom and democracy. Our newspaper reporter, just like in US, very proactive, very active, okay? So their numbers are trustable, okay? Their VC money in 2012 invested is $2.6 billion, okay? And also, very interesting, he wrote here, the central government put their Central Learning Research Bureau into this village. So everybody in the same classroom next to each other. And last year, 2013, this place has 4,800 new startups. That's crazy number, 14,800. And I want to show you many young faces. And during the weekend, all the lighting in the big building are, lighted like this. People has desire to be successful there from their youth generation. You may say there's like a barbarian place, maybe lack of the IP system, maybe lacking of something, okay, which I don't want to elaborate it, but the guy successful can take all. So very barbarian, but very aggressive, amazing. So this is what I was there. This is they set out 3 cafeteria, big cafeteria, VC there. Young people here, look at young people. It's look like an interview, searching for their capital. And usually within one afternoon or within a week, the decision made. Somebody get money, somebody didn't, So this kind of momentum, compared to what you just said, right? We still have VC.
We do.
But the VC may want to get definitely return like 10 times, 100 times from IPO. That will be a long journey for entrepreneur.
That's right.
And at the same time, our investment banker is very, very critical on inventors or entrepreneur. Almost startup cannot get money from the bank. Here, you can get money from the bank.
The appetite for risk is very different right now, and I think that's an extremely important factor. I feel like we still have an entrepreneurial culture from the amount of applications that I get for, hey, I'm starting a new company, can you give some seed money,
right.
blah, blah, blah. The ideas are there, but the appetite for us as a society to put money into ventures that have a risk component has really dried up in a scary way.
So return on investment to encourage money to support entrepreneur in this country need to be restudied. Return on investment only based on the IPO with the stock return. Most of the VC, most of the new venture can be killed. But why they don't pay attention to that? Of course they pay attention to that. But the return on investment in their assessment with the government steering, a lot of new metrics be built up so that the investor money can be, I would say, returned differently.
Right.
I cannot give elaborate picture, but I encourage you, in our country, there are a lot of smarter financial guy. We engineer a circle to put the value, to put the creation. We got to bring that financial guy to study with us what's going on there and redefine the return on investment in this country, right? So, people are amazing about the success of the Facebook, right? This country is still that kind of disruptive, technology successful. But I urge, we also have to make evolutionary innovation, get the money, get the entrepreneur to move on. So we get two insurance places. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's shift the discussion a little bit in terms of the markets. We have a lot of, depending on industry, the decisions around investment and proximity to markets. So maybe you can comment both in terms of where you see critical growth and how approaching that, how it impacts the investment both in U.S. and outside of U.S. is part one of the question. And probably related to that, and we may come back, is how do equally small and medium enterprises within the U.S. access and tap? Because it's quite different, the resources that a large corporation has to do so than does a small corporation.
So I think, you're right. We have to sort of put the small, medium, and large into different buckets.
Let's talk about the market.
We'll talk about the market opportunities. And I mean, clearly in healthcare, there's a huge amount of unmet need worldwide. And I think that it does divide out, though, into developed and developing world. And there's still not, I think, enough resource devoted to diseases in the developing world. If we look at malaria, tuberculosis, all the things that Gates Foundation is funding, but there's not very many pharma partners at the table to do that, even though there are many, many people who are affected. It's a question of payer. Who is going to pay for it, right? So those diseases and those markets are largely left to the not-for-profit or philanthropic sector. And then diseases of the developed world where, let's talk about Brazil, India, China, where the middle classes are growing and there is now money to buy those drugs. It's very interesting for US or European countries to try to be in some of those markets. China has been, frankly, a very challenging place to be, and I'm sure you may have read about the accusations against various pharmaceutical companies of bribery and corruption and so on there. That's companies that have products that could be sold there. And it's really had a chilling effect in particular there. But in the rest of the world, I think we're making good headway. But the point is really, if we're going to sell in Brazil and we want to make money there as a US-based company, countries are now saying, okay, help us build our infrastructure. Help us to be able to be the creators and inventors. Help us to be the manufacturers, and that's the price of entry. And I actually think that's a positive because, as we were discussing earlier, the access to different ways of thinking, to people who are located in the countries who can identify the problems more rapidly, that's all for the good. So I see that there is a win-win, a potential win-win situation. I don't think we have the business models for it yet. Everybody's experimenting wildly and madly, and 90% of the models are not going to work, but we just have to keep trying until we find ways, whether it's co-location of scientific personnel or exchanges, or you do this, we carve this out, you do that, we do this. I don't think there's a good answer. I'd be curious, actually, when we go to the broader conversation, to hear from other people about different models for globalization of research as companies extend their reach into different markets.
So one of the call-outs is your investment in other countries is also a part of market entry.
Yes.
It's really a co-investment on market
Yeah,
entry
and
is a major driving force for you.
that's right. And some companies, Russia in particular, has made it a requirement. There's a number of countries now, if you want to sell your drug in that country, you must. And it's interesting because some of it ends up being a little bit pro forma, which is unfortunate, but there isn't always the infrastructure to tap into. If the requirement is you must spend X number of dollars on applied research here, and you go to try to spend the money there, and it doesn't know where to actually apply it, so you end up spending it, but it's sort of a bit, I don't know, so.
The rate of return's at risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nikki, maybe you can comment.
Okay, on the marketing, I think, first I want to say American businessmen are still the most aggressive in exploring the market and moving to the market. But that's not high percentage of this country. I think we should move more people devoted to value creation and market exploration. That's percentage of the population. Okay, that's one thing I emphasize. Second thing is B2B and B2C and B2 infrastructure are totally different things. How these three things be well planned? For example, like B2C, you need consumers. Then India, China, maybe Brazil, maybe Indonesia. Well, China and India maybe, China may be the most accessible. Then we need to make a market information proactive and to our marketing force for many enterprises or companies. That kind of job can be done by privately, but certain steering, I think the government still have responsibility. Who is doing the best marketing is a Korean guy. I think Samsung spent a lot of money. In the past, we are so proud of our marketing, right, Nick? IBM was everywhere. IBM executive pick up the phone in 80s. His power probably much more than whoever president in the world. And I heard Samsung spent 10 years in certain countries without any return on investment until their new notebook, not new notebook, new pad type of things, that place in Africa received much faster than other brand because people are already familiar with Samsung. That kind of long, persistent marketing efforts, I think the private industry and government should have certain mechanism, okay, for B2C or B2 overseas. In terms of B2B, I worry less. I don't know what the audience opinions. I think American businessmen are doing well. The only thing is that whether the marketing is only one company horizontally or is a group of company clustered, we haven't formed that kind of new structure, which I think future needs heterogeneous integration of many things. And the business model behavior on the marketing will be different. The last thing I want to say, what are the heterogeneous stuff? I have full confidence Internet of Things or Internet of Everything. I ask, what means IOE, Internet of Everything? Because they say Internet of Things only inorganic stuff. Internet of Everything, it's include human, everything include. I don't know whether that's good definition or not. Some people teach me that. So wearable, our industry, I have confidence on the roadmap is that we are professional use notebook. Then the normal people use cell phone. Now the three virgin lands, car, home, and my body. So my body will be so important. So I think wearable with sensor, trillion of sensors. You look like a robot, but you don't sense that, okay? You look at things differently, but you are not burdened by the glasses. Many things will happen. I don't worry about technological marketing stuff, but I worry those kind of things happen, how the value creation people here deserve their return. Otherwise, as I mentioned, reflected to China ways, the first mirror image of your technology, and has certain, the duty and many things need to be negotiated. But that time they already deep transplanted technology and rooted, and also with Chinese, right? Their weakness is they are hard to export, okay? Even they have all this kind of thing, they need to make many things to change to export. But their lucky things, they have 1.3 billion people. If they motivate them to use, but US, we have only 0.2 billion, 0.3 billion. So we need to plan the marketing strategy more systematically. Okay, that's
to be an
my
effective
suggestion.
exporter.
Yes.
Let's open to audience questions for the panelists. Yes?
I enjoy all the lectures and discussions tremendously. Actually, I had my hands up in the last session. But anyway, I'm Ed Chow, and started as an agriculture engineer, mechanical engineer, and then bioengineer as a profession. You see, I'm a professor in orthopedic surgery, which is true, not just at Hopkins, but also at Mayo. But anyway, I wasn't invited. Proctor was kind enough to allow me to attend. I have reasons of why I want to be here. Let me share you with two things. I think the previous panel should also take notes on that. The first is that I was involved in the value assessment for the American Orthopedic Association on their services. My point to you and the rest is, do you have a method of quantifying value? I think you should work on that, but there is one for the American Association of Orthopedic Surgeons. They have a formula for that. I would let you know about the formula. And actually, I later on adopted that formula for the medical products because I was very much involved in devices used in orthopedic surgery. We have gentlemen from J&J. I did a lot of work for them, and also I have a son working for J&J as well. The formula for the value calculation is basically a numerator, a denominator. The numerator have four things in there. The first one is efficacy, okay? Then that is multiplied by another factor I have not heard today, is safety. Safety. Safety relates to a certain thing that I would relate to you on my second point, related to ethics. We have to pay attention to that. The other two factors are services and education. That's the numerator. The denominator is the cost, but not just the cost. The cost divided by the durability of the service or effect in terms of years. So I use this particular formula also on devices, which is quite applicable. I think in medical field, we really have to pay attention about the safety and the durability of the surface, that the cost is secondary. The second point I wish to share with the panel here and previously is about ethics. Actually, tomorrow I'll be coming here again for the meeting of Association of Medical Ethics. I think I remember when I was in mechanical engineering area, we also have ethics, but this issue has not been paying attention to it. Now, this association I joined, even though I'm not a physician myself, and I think ethical standards is something that we must pay attention to it. for example, 10 years ago, you have outsourcing of everything. I don't have a question.
Yes.
I will stop quickly. More than 10 years ago, we have outsourcing in everything. We have outsourcing of medical services as well. You can have your hip replaced. You have cardiovascular surgery out in Thailand, Taiwan. Sorry about that, I'm mentioning about Taiwan. And now there is a reverse coming back to the United States. Because many things, particularly on medical services, it's not just a matter of everything done. The education, the follow-up, the services are extremely important. So I think these are the 2 points I wish to point out here. And I think that you may wish to have experts over here comment on that. Thank you very much.
Do you want to comment?
I don't disagree about the ethics or the safety issues. I mean, I think in our industry, there's no question about that. We wouldn't be able to get approval really anywhere in the world now to sell our products without being able to demonstrate the safety aspect. So,
I honestly believe the companies that are embracing this and put value on it, it's a different set of values than had historically been placed, and really thinking about different business models on various components. So I think your points are well taken. Nick?
Yeah, I like being controversial, so let me just remind you, and Ruby, software transfers all of the responsibility and safety to you. They're not responsible. People who develop software are responsible for nothing. You don't get the application unless you check the box that says you hold no one accountable. You don't ever read it. Do you ever read the terms and conditions with the software you download? Did anybody do that besides me? Do you know how much you forego by checking the box? You don't care. You lust for the application, and you just take it and assume the responsibility. So it's interesting in terms of how they were able to build that culture to get you to assume your own responsibility for their mistakes.
Well, may I have one comment?
Yes.
I think ethical integrity is super important. That's what Americans face. We want to keep those two and also get the business win. You can refer to outside the region, someplace, as I mentioned, barbarian, winning and surviving is more important than many things. So we need to change it. That means we have 3 times of efforts than the other people. One of my suggestions is that we don't give up that, but we need to encourage our financial system and our innovation system penetrate at early stage, at least rooted into certain area. Mm-hmm. We don't play an ethical thing, we don't play non-integrity things, but we also can participate the competition. Rather than we are making everything so good inside the country, but outside the country there are a lot of growing forces, and which need us more efforts to make our wins. Okay, so that's one of my constant understanding how to face the civilized, I won't say that words, but how to keep integrity, but how to make business win. You have to put extra efforts. You cannot sacrifice any one of them.
Okay, next question.
there's a microphone coming.
Yeah, I mean, considering this is a session on lessons from the rest of the world, I wanted to bring back the discussion on the resource topic we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the reasons why the rest of the world is resourceful is because they lack resources, and I want to just illustrate it with two examples. So the Indian pharmaceutical industry provides 40%. So there's almost a 1 in 2 chance that if you go to your pharmacy, you get a tablet from made in India. And the reason why that came to be is because in 1970 they established a moat by saying we won't recognize product patents anymore, and that was because the medicines were not available cheaply locally, and because of that resource gap, the local industry developed to satisfy a need, and over time that industry has grown as a result, and now it's not a threat to the U.S. economy, but it's growing up the value chain. Another example is vaccines, which is where I play. Big pharmaceutical companies like Merck, we have not supplied vaccines to the developing world traditionally. And as a result, there are entrepreneurs in India and in China that have developed companies to manufacture vaccines, and now they're supplying almost the entire developing world from mom and pop operations. But as they are doing that, they're moving up the value chain to a point where they're so resourceful, they are licensing in vaccines from NIH for $10,000. There's a rotavirus vaccine candidate licensed by about 5 different vaccine companies for $10,000 each. This is US taxpayer-funded research that is being developed in India and in China, and now we're competing. Merck is competing with some of these companies. So I think the lack of resources drives these guys to develop an ecosystem, and I think one way to maybe counter that is to find a way for American companies to meet the needs of those populations so you don't create that resource gap in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
You had mentioned briefly about Brazil and Russia, so I'm just very interested. There's a big push there for these PPPs, public-private partnerships. Mm-hmm. What's your view on the success of those PPPs? Because it seems to be a lot of them, right? I think Brazil went over 100 pretty quick when they announced them, but I'm not sure whether they'll truly create a sustainable manufacturing network for the long term or whether it's a kind of a short-term hype. Just interested in your views.
I concur that it's the jury's still out, but I'm not convinced that that's going to be the way to build a sustainable ecosystem.
Well, I'm not familiar with that area, but I think I don't think a PPP is a really sustainable force. I think personal, even in the telecom and the semiconductor area, and the private industry has to move further. They only need initial, maybe some incubation or something.
I mean, we've seen some examples of PPEs that are more Western-based in the bio industry, especially in the pre-competitive space, that have had a very major impact. There's a couple that almost every pharmaceutical company belongs to, but there's also funding from the NIH, funding from Canada, funding from Sweden that actually brings together the two skill sets and in a pre-competitive space have made a big impact. But those have been focused on particular areas, in science that are seen as emerging and needing public support still because the products are so far away that they won't be funded strictly from the private enterprise. But with that funding from the public sector, you can get to the point where now products could emerge. So I think it can work, but I don't think that it should. I think that should be one example of something you can use when it's appropriate. Do you know what I mean? I think it's a tool and not a solution in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. And I think your earlier points on what makes a successful ecosystem, if all of those pieces are not present, then you have a risk of failure. And in many of these cases, there are many components, but not all of them in a sustained commitment for that investment, both in talent and in the market growth. Chris, you had a question?
Question for Nicky. In your opening remarks, you pointed to the desire being something that's very critical. And I was wondering, short of walking around and seeing lights on in the office or the cafes, what would be some metrics that you can think of, or just some thoughts as to how that could be measured? How would be ways to characterize desire at a national level?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know how to measure it, but when I was in that environment, I can feel the excitement and the sense of urgency and move on. You know, within that short, you know, maybe 100 foot around, 100 feet square area, everybody is try to propose new things, and VC are taking a look at that. So metrics to measure that, you know, the desire. I met several, not just several. I met a lot of Chinese people. I think their eyes is, you know, shiny. Once talk about the innovations. If I visit some of the you know, Asia country which was very strong, you know, for example, I should say in Japan, their young people aren't, you know, just follow the rules.
Nicky, I
So-
want to ask, what do you think about surveys to try to understand interest areas of young people and what is motivating them? Because I think there's a motivation factor here, right? And if you would ask 100 high school students, you know, okay, here's 3 different paths you could follow, you know, and some of them lead to more innovation, whether it's being an engineer or life sciences or whatever, or you want to go into the finance sector or banking or something like that. I think you'd see pretty profound differences in how those would be answered in a region, you know, in Shanghai or Beijing versus how those would be answered in other parts of the world.
That's good answer for me. I think some specialized consultant firm can design some questionnaire, and we can tell them where to go. They just go there, study it, and give the survey. I tell you, that shocked me in the Beijing Zhongguancun. Sometimes I saw the middle-aged people come in for their proposals, which is not so bad. And the parents are all crowded around, talk about their children. So it's look like, what should I say? I know how to say in Mandarin, but I don't know how to say. It's, I should say, all population work on high-tech success. You know, it's not just your single guy, okay, away from the family. Your family, relative, all concerned, and they say, wow, this is amazing. I can watch movies, why don't you do this and do that? Even not on the technology side, even on the content side. You know, I see the enthusiastic, you know, and people, family talk about it. Now they have, you know, their WeChat, you know, a lot of conversations so closely related. That's what, in this country, we are not shaping on that. We're not saying we want to copy that, but at least we shouldn't let our young people be alone to fight for their career at their early career stage.
That's right. And I think there's a kind of
and
fatalism
also,
here.
I don't know, engineers was viewed as, you know, it's kind of, you know, less income earnings or whatever in this country.
That's right.
And so how we change that kind of mindset, because engineering, like Nick you promote, I think is excellent critical issue. Engineer create values. The lawyer maintain values. If you don't have values, how you maintain it, right? Sorry if you're a lawyer here, okay? I trust my lawyer, but I'm saying engineers are very important to creating values. But how will that be educated at the early stage? And also, you talk about metrics, right? So how does our young people know the other side's desire, right? Currently, Americans know much less than the other countries, than the other country in the Far East know America, because they learn English early. So we need to let our young people also know the environments. But it's big efforts. I don't know how to really use a certain resource doing that, but we have to do that.
I think there's 2 cultural factors, right? One is the lack of a hunger or drive, right? There's a certain fatalism. I don't know how many of you have interactions with with sort of general young people, not just sort of the best and the brightest are always going to be the best and the brightest no matter where you go or, you know, circumstances in place. But there is a sort of fatalism among young people. There's no chance for me to have the same life my parents had, you know, in terms of income or wealth or things or however you want to measure it. And I think we as a country need to, as you've said, give people that hope that there is a way to get there, because I think that without that, then all the inducements in the world don't make any difference. So I think there's, you know, there's the draw towards the areas. How do we get young people to be excited about these different fields? And the other is, how do we get them to see that there is a path for the country to have a future with their efforts involved? So, but you're right about the families. The families are real, and the community.
I don't want to
very
exaggerate
important.
my point to deviate. American open mind, entrepreneurial environment, and you know, still the best as a
Absolutely.
dream paradise for every people in the world.
Absolutely.
So one way we can attract people to our best educational university systems, but then we have to select to keep some people stay. So a lot of issues around the immigration policy, right? You don't train them and let them go back there to fulfill their dream. So on the other hand, they're also outgrown young generation there. That's what I suggest our people also should put some efforts into their community, get some people, and we have to move this two strategic move.
So
That's the most ideal picture, okay? But on the other hand, young people want to come to United States, including China, including everywhere. When they come in, they are performing well, how we can keep them. Because last events I encountered that some even Harvard Medical School or Harvard Biological Engineering graduates couldn't stay in this country.
Right, I know.
So
It's an issue.
yeah, so anyway, I'm not an expert on that. I'm just express what people told me, okay?
So I'd just like to make a couple of comments on the metrics from my own experience in China. What I was seeing in that time period, so 2006 to 2010, particularly Tsinghua, where the epicenter of a lot of the investments coming from, the rise of the business school, measures around the top students, which students were electing to start businesses. The time period I was there, I was seeing the transition from election to go with multinationals and state-owned companies, much more into starting and leading their businesses, a whole climate around resources on how to grow businesses most effectively, the funding, both venture capital, but also a large quantity of private dollar flow that are sitting around these communities. And so the interesting part to me was what the university and the government was doing on measurement of the top talent and where they were going, and then supporting dollars flowing to that top talent, more so than I've seen in the US.
It's perfect for the question I have, Teresa. I want to go back to the question you asked Nikki in the beginning, a little differently.
Okay.
Nikki, we want you to move your business back to the United States. What do you need to do that?
Oh, wow. I'm a CEO. This is purely non-public. Okay, Nick, you always give me the task, like old days in IBM. I tell you, one motivation to at least link into this community, whatever the public company be repositioning, is for innovative people, innovative talents. Today, the Taiwanese, we design a technology service model. We train our young kids, but after 20 years good time, our young kids also enjoy their fruits from maybe their parents or whatever. We want to get more competition to them. But getting to the real innovative stage still take time. So why to move company here? Or how, I'm not saying move my company, but my company has money. I want to invest here on the biotech, for example. Right? I have a you know, my older son, Timothy, is an associate professor at MIT on synthetic biology. That's what I can enjoy your talk, okay? I want to build a branch here or division here, or a joint venture here because of innovative and value creation things are still the best in US.
Absolutely right.
And the way I move, in Taiwan, we are very free. We are, you know, just invested. But I want to promote Taiwan as technology service because these two countries, in semiconductor, Nick knows, fabless company like a Qualcomm, you know, John is on the Qualcomm board, work with the TSMC and make the big change. Old days, the IDM company doesn't think that this two combination can be successful, right? And that's what Taiwan is moving on technology service. Our young people hasn't jumped over to the first order innovation, but gradually we change them in education system. They are smart, they are diligent, they can do technology service. They are not very warm personality. So my idea picture, Nick, is that I have innovation research center here, and I have technology service infrastructure there. I combine the US-Taiwan advantages and share the profits rather than Taiwan just you know, share 2% of the OEM, ODM. They will not grow. Once they are not growing, John, the Chinese stuff going up, and they make service to their company later on, rather than company from US. So we face that kind of a challenge. You know, of course, on business to business, sometimes, you know, buyer want to lower profit from OEM, so we get 4%. But logistically, long-term strategy, maybe US and Taiwanese company alliance should be readjusted to make both win-win. So answer your question, I think I certainly already initiate many projects to start up my subsidiary company or investment joint venture in this country. The need I already explained.
Yep.
Okay.
Jack,
Thank
I
you.
think you had a question?
Jack Hu from the University of Michigan. I want to offer two observations based on this theme. The first one I think is, you know, in particular, Nicky, you talk about China. I think people there are much hungrier than what we are in the US. Up till 1995, I would say most people had nothing. So you can make a lot of money and lose all. You are not worried, right? Here, you have a house, you have a family, but you worry about losing your house. So go bankrupt, then you don't have anything to support the family. But I think in China, people don't worry about that, at least up till now. So you make money on stock market, you gamble right away, you lose everything, people are still happy. So I think that's the story there. So I think everyone is hungry, so they tend to be taking risk much more than we do. The second, I think, is supporting, I would say, embracing early stage technologies, but not much on the science. So if you look at Japan, Taiwan, and China, I would say those countries are not known as scientific powerhouse yet, right? But governments actually invest in technologies. So in the 80s, I think Japan has MITI, Ministry of Industry, Technology, I think Information. So they work with companies, work with industry. ITRI is a very good example. I think they have 6 or 7 different labs. They take the discoveries and then make them into product and then spin off businesses. So I think ITRI contributed tremendously to Taiwan's business success. So semiconductor, CNC, machine tools, chemical industry, and all those. And then if you look at China right now, I think is look at what's going on around the world and repackage, right? So all the ITs, I mean, Alibaba, WeChat, I use WeChat. I think it's quite powerful. But China also, I think, has a ministry that's called MOST, Ministry of Science and Technologies. They also has a National Science Foundation. So you invest in the basic science, but most invest in technologies. But in the US, I think we don't have that early stage technology investment like all the
Okay? I think we're going to call it a wrap.